Legal perspective on this issue. It's a big part of it. There's paper involved in this process. So Melissa Brisman, who is a wonderful lawyer, family law lawyer, and a specialist in reproductive law from New Jersey, also licensed to practice in New York State, will talk to us about some of that. Melissa.
I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about what our office does. Basically, we're a law firm, but we specialize in reproductive law, and we find about 200 gestational surrogates every year. We have about 100 pregnant women right now, and we help coordinate with the various medical clinics in the process. I also have 3 children from a gestational carrier, twin boys who are 9, and basically and a daughter who's 4. So I'm not going to talk that much about finding the carrier because I believe one of the other panelists is going to do that, but we also do find the carrier. From a legal perspective, there are basically 4 legal things you need to do for every arrangement. You're going to need, first of all, the carrier and a health insurance policy. That's usually one of the first things I do with anyone who brings a carrier to me or wants us to find a carrier is look into what kind of health insurance that person has. It's a very important aspect of the arrangement. You need to make sure that she has coverage for her pregnancy. There are various ways to do that. Some people buy a health insurance policy through Lloyd's of London. It's pretty expensive. It costs about $10,000 and it has a $15,000 deductible. People do that because they don't want to use her own health insurance and are afraid that maybe it has an exclusion. What we do is we look actually at her health insurance policy and make sure that there is no exclusion in her policy for a gestational carrier pregnancy. And then if there is, a lot of times what we'll do is look on the free market to see if we can find her something else. That is a little bit of a cheaper option, and it does have some risk to it. If they find out that she is a carrier and there is no exclusion, but they try to fight her on her pregnancy, then you're looking at having your attorney write some letters regarding the pregnancy. In our office, we've actually never had anybody have a pregnancy that they had to pay out of pocket for that was more than the cost of the Lloyd's of London policy. But it certainly is possible, and it certainly in some cases probably has happened, which is why a lot of people go to buy the Lloyd's of London. But it's a very important aspect to be aware of, and a lot of couples who do a gestational surrogacy, especially those who do them on their own, tend to overlook the health insurance aspect for the pregnancy. So usually when looking at a carrier, that's one of the first things that we look at is her health insurance. Then you're also going to be looking at a carrier. You're going to want to do a contract with her and also be aware of what state she's from. So that's the first thing that you need to look into is jurisdiction. If you live in New York State, you can have a carrier from New York State, but you can't be compensated. So that's where the confusion lies, where most people think that they can't have a carrier from New York State. Certainly your sister wants to be your carrier, your best friend. You can have a carrier from New York State, but she should be properly screened, and you should make sure that she's a proper candidate, and you cannot compensate her, even if she is your sister. You're going to want somebody from a state that's more friendly. California is traditionally one of the more friendly states for gay couples, but now you have a lot on the East Coast. We use a lot of carriers from Massachusetts, from Connecticut. In both those states, you can now do legally what's called a pre-birth parentage order. Basically, what you're looking for as if you're a gay single person, you're going to want your name on the birth certificate alone without a mother. If you're a gay couple, you're going to want both your names on the birth certificate as a couple. So you're going to want to look to a state that's going to allow you to do this. So for instance, if you were on the East Coast and you came to me, I would tell you, we don't want New York, we don't want New Jersey, we prefer not to have Florida. Florida is, one of those states where the statute doesn't apply, and you cannot have both their names on the birth certificate as gay men in Florida. So there are going to be certain states you're going to look at. So even if you're finding the carrier on your own, you're going to want to make sure you have a legal advisor to tell you what states to stay away from. There are certain risks when you do a gestational carrier arrangement that you have to keep in mind. The biggest one is abortion and reduction. So let's say you have a carrier and she's pregnant with triplets, and you agreed in the contract that you want her to reduce that pregnancy to 2 because you feel that triplets is just too risky for an early birth and that 3 babies is just more than you bargained for. So you put it into the contract with her. She had her own lawyer to represent her. You negotiated it, and she goes to the appointment to reduce the pregnancy, and she says, you know what? I can't do this. I didn't realize all 3 hearts are beating. I cannot have a reduction. I know I promised. I can't do it. Legally, you could technically sue her, not pay her, withhold, certain benefits from her, but we can't actually force her to have the reduction. So although in my office, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of cases where that has happened before, it is definitely a risk of the process. So you need to make sure that wherever you find your carrier, that you're on the same page about when you're going to abort, when you're going to reduce, what kind of testing you're going to have during the process. And although if you come to any of the panelists up here, I'm sure you're going to get great legal work, there's no substitute for having good communication with your carrier. So the purpose of the contract is not really for lawsuits or protection, although that is one of the elements that you want out of it. It's really more a map of the meeting of the minds. How much are you going to pay, or what is she going to be paid for? But it's also, how are you going to act? Who's going to be in the delivery room? Do you want to attend doctor's appointments? Do you want to have access to your medical records? All of these things should be addressed in any contract that you have with her. You also should consider, even if you find the carrier on your own, if it's a paid carrier, using an attorney trust account to pay her. It's one of the things where when we find the carrier, we actually require it. We don't want you to be paying your carrier for anything directly. We feel it comes in the middle of a relationship. And it also can be just to clarify basic questions about reimbursement. Somebody might feel uncomfortable if they're calling you directly to say, do I get reimbursed for this? Do I get reimbursed for that? A lot of times it's really a lot easier. We have a special person in our office, and most places do, where you could just call and ask your questions about what you get reimbursed, about the carrier getting reimbursed. So you should make sure your contract is detailed and it has all of these elements addressed. You also want to make sure that you have, you're in a state where you're going to feel protected at the hospital. So for instance, if you're in Massachusetts and we have a carrier in Massachusetts and we have a birth order that will name both guys as the parents, when that baby comes out, the hospital already knows. We're going to look to the parents for choices about medical decisions. If that baby is circumcised, that's going to be your choice. That's not going to be your carrier's choice. That baby's going to go on your health insurance policy on the process itself. It's also, look at your relationship with your partner. It actually has a lot to do with the process, especially with the advent of civil unions. For instance, in New Jersey, if I have a couple in New Jersey and I got a pre-birth order in Massachusetts, prior to the civil union law, if they were not in a civil union, the Department of Health would not honor that pre-birth order, and I would have to go through an appeal process. So if it's possible to get a civil union in your state, that actually may help you because of this reason. In certain states, birth orders only apply to married couples, and you have to be married or in some other legal relationship under the statute. So if you are having a child in Massachusetts and you are a couple in New Jersey or New York, you have to solidify your relationship through either a domestic partnership or a civil union in order for the Department of Vital Records to easily recognize the order that you have. There are different ways of getting your carrier. You can find your carrier. A lot of people, and I know the person who was supposed to talk about this, so I told Terry I'd say a few words. You can find your carrier through an agency or a law firm like us. You can also find them on your own on the internet. It's extremely important if you do that you hire somebody to do all the things that agency or law firm would have done. So for instance, if you go out and find your carrier on your own, it's important that you still make sure that she's screened, that she has a criminal background check, that she's got a home study, that she's got psychological evaluations, that there's an escrow account set up to pay her, that somebody looks at her health insurance, that you still have the contract with her. You want to make sure just because you found the person on your own that you still are doing all the things that somebody like us would do. Because it's very important to make sure that you don't have a scam. There was a woman in Florida, it was about 2 years ago. She had 6 couples paying her. She's actually on trial right now because she was sending out ultrasounds and she convinced all 6 couples that she was carrying their baby. When you're working with an established place, that's much less likely to happen. You're going to have certain controls in place. We're in constant communication with your clinic to make sure those things go well. So I'm sure, as a lawyer that I know, I can see I went over my time. So if you do have questions, you can come to the table afterwards. And we do also have a stack of legal articles on recent cases regarding families in the gay and lesbian community, and the summer summary was our